This is a 3 foot by 4 foot N scale layout. I build them in my garage. Cost me about $100. I try to sell them for $200. And to work in this tunnel area that you see under here, I cut this circle out right here from the top. And after I've laid the track and of course the roadbed, I put the piece back in to make one big area to work with. But I decided to try something just a little bit different with my next layout. Right, for this layout, instead of cutting a circle to access the little valley below, I went ahead and cut out the entire area, leaving just the subsurface under the track, creating a couple of bridges and of course much better access to the area below than with a tunnel. But I don't want to increase the cost of the layout, so I've got to figure out an inexpensive way to put in a nice looking bridge, and I'm going to show you how to do that. Okay, what I'm going to use for the material for the base of the bridge is just a piece of 1-inch foam. Get this at Home Depot for $6. If you want to, you can get 8 of them in a 4x8 sheet for $19. It's much cheaper that way. But now I'm going to cut it down into a smaller piece to make it easier to work and to measure. Alright, I cut out an 8.5 inch by 4-inch square, and then by trial and error I cut the edges to match this. This is not perpendicular to this, so it's not going to be quite that easy. But what you need is a piece that you can set in there and it's flush up against here, flush up against this stanchion, and flush up against this one. Alright, and when you get it in, just take your pencil and scribe it. Okay? So now, and we will continue this to the end. Now I have a piece that will fit exactly under this. I'll cut 2 of these, and when you put those together, this height is 2 inches. This height is about 1/16 of an inch less, so I'll have to do some shaving to get those 2 pieces so that they fit one right under the other. And when I get those pieces cut, I'll be back to you. Alright, I've cut out my 2 pieces. This is my top. I wrote in there top to make sure I didn't put it in this way. This is the way it goes. This goes on here. You'll also notice my bottom one is just a little bit longer, and that's because these are not exactly perpendicular. They're close but not exact, so I've also cut out a little notch in here so that I can lay it flat on the trains there. Okay, so as you can see now, we have the base of a bridge. And what we're going to do, don't worry about the raggedness here, because all of this is going to be faced on either side. And we're going to be cutting out an arch through here. Alright, so the next step is just to glue these 2 pieces together. You can use pins or whatever you want. Me, I'm just going to put some glue in there and stick them back under. And I'll get back when those pieces are dry. My pieces are well glued together now, and now we have to decide how we're going to cut the tunnel. As you notice, when I cut this little slice back here, I cut it sideways because that's the way this goes. But when I looked, I checked on Google and I looked at a lot of pictures of stone trestles, and not a one of them had sideways cut like this. Everything was perpendicular to this. So that's the way I'm going to make this one. So we'll put this down and we're going to mark where we want to cut for the opening for the pass. Now, this is far enough for here, but the track, you can see my pencil is on the edge of the track over here, and that's all the way over here. So we have to clear that a little more. So for this to be wide enough for the train to pass and have clearance, it's going to have to start over here. Okay? And of course the track runs away from this side, so it only has to go from here to here. So we'll just match that up with that. And we're going to scribe it all the way up to the top. Okay? So let me pull it out, it'll be a little bit easier. And we're going to run this all the way to the top, because we still have this area below it. And we're going to find that when we're going to find when we're working with this that if we try to leave a little piece up here, it's just going to break anyway. So, so we might as well make it in two pieces. So, I've marked my side, and I'm going to cut. Now I'll have two pieces, one to put in here, one to put in there, so I'm going to mark them left and right. And I will cut those out and be back. So I finished carving. Managed to leave it in one piece. I'll stick it in now. Got a car on the track here. As you can see, I have plenty of clearance. And it's necessary that you have a little extra clearance here because we're going to put a facing on that that's going to drop it down just a little bit. Same way back here, the facing will change it a little. So the next thing we need to do is start with our facing. And what I'm going to use is my foam core. I buy this at the dollar store for $1. It comes in a 30 by 20 inch sheet and has the foam core inside, so I'm going to spray the paper with a little water. It makes it easier to remove the paper, and that's what we'll use for the facing. So I'm going to start with the underside, and I'm going to cut a piece 2 inches by 9 inches, rip off the paper, and then we'll start forming it to the underside of this. Okay, I've cut out a piece of my foam core and curled it so that it will fit inside that arch. Just take it a little bit at a time. If you try to just push it in there, it'll crack and you'll have to cut another piece. So give it a little bit of a bend. By the way, these radius bridges are absolutely the hardest ones to do. The straight ones are a lot easier. So I'll push this up in here and mark it with my pencil. And then go to the other side and push it up in. And mark it with the pencil. So I'll cut off along my lines. and I'll be ready to have a piece to attach to this. So as soon as I get that cut out, I'll be back. I've cut out my piece, and it fits really well. Put it in here, grab it under there. And it fits just fine. So, but I have flattened it out because I want to do the stonework now. Now, I'm having a little trouble getting this to show up on the camera, but what I'm doing is just freehand now. I'm following the arch around, making a little score with my pick. And I'll just do a few of these because I want to show you the cross pieces too. But all I'm doing is scoring the foam, and then we'll do our vertical lines to simulate big stone blocks, and these are really big in N scale. But you can make them any size that you want. And here, check to make sure the camera is picking this up okay. Do you see how that's done? So I'm going to continue scoring this, and then I'll show you how we add the color to make it look like stone. All right, I've finished scribing my stone, and now we're going to use weathering chalk to put color in it. I use the AIM weathering chalk, Adventures in Miniature, but they have been bought out by Monroe. But it's still the same fine quality chalk. I like to use the chalk because it gives a more natural appearance than paint, because it blends together without actually mixing the color. If you've got two colors of chalk down, they do not mix to form a new color. You just get both colors. This is not paint. So I'll just take my brush and grind it in. This will also fill in the scribes and make them a little more visible. But we're going for a basic gray color, but then we will highlight it with some other colors. Now, this doesn't take a long time. The foam holds the chalk fairly well. And I'm running a little low on gray, so I don't want to waste this. I'm going to take this powder and put it back in the jar. Okay, and we're going to highlight it with some other colors. A little yellow. Just rub it right in with the other. Doesn't take much. And one of the reasons I'm not being as particular on this side is this is the side that the old steam locomotives used to pass under, so we're going to be putting black on top of that. And here's a little red highlight, red rust. And we'll finish off down the center. Black goes a long way, so I want to cover up all your work. But just in the center, we'll put where some soot got in it. Okay, fade that in out towards the edges. And let me check in here. So as you can see, it's not particularly hard. And now we have our stonework to go underneath the bridge. I'm going to put some glue on the back of this, put it under there, on the layout, and I shouldn't need any pins to hold it. Since it's cut correctly, the bridge itself should hold it in place. And when that's dry, we'll pull it out and we'll do the facing in a similar manner. It's just a little bit easier to cut the pieces. I'll be back. All right, my underside is finished. Let me get up there so you can see it. And I cut out 2 pieces. The height I want is this height, which is 2 inches, plus 3/8 of an inch for the subfloor, and then another 1/4 of an inch to raise the edge of the bridge up even with the rails. Okay? Now, generally speaking, I like to do any drawing or scribing on the paper side, but because this is a radius, I need it to be able to bend, and it doesn't bend right with the paper. Also, I thought you might like to see me remove some of the paper. I believe I discussed it earlier, but just take your spray bottle, spray it, rub the water in a little bit, and it should remove easily. And there you go. So, to get the mark on this, now I don't know if you remember on my layout, the stanchion that this abuts against is just a little bit underneath the bridge area. So this is actually just a slightly longer than the bridge itself. So we're going to have to, when we put this piece on up here, it's going to have to be cut back just a little bit. But now that I have this, I'm going to bend it a little bit. Remember, if you try to bend it too fast, it'll crack and break and you'll have to make another piece. So we'll get a bend in it to match our radius, like that. Then we'll place the bottom there and the bottom there in the middle, because we're going to have some overlap. We can cut that off later as we need it. But we're going to have to, let's see, let me put something under there for it to rest on so it stays rolled up. All right. See, now we have it laying flat and we can scribe our arch. Here, like that. So now I can cut out this, and I'm going to cut it just a little bit inside that scribe, because what I really want, it must cover this part. It must go down that far, and it's okay if I get it a little long. I can come back and cut that off. But if it's too short, we have to cut another piece. So I didn't quite get this across. So now, the secret to cutting foam, for those of you who don't already know it, is a sharp knife. If you're not sure your knife blade is sharp enough, it's not. Don't stint on the blades. You'll get much nicer cuts And everything will be much easier if you have a sharp knife blade. Okay. So, now we have our piece to fit on here. And it's very, very close to being right. Now, what we're going to do now is we're going to line this and color it the same way we did the underside. But the top part, in other words, everything above here, everything above 2 inches, we're not going to use. So let me go ahead and mark the 2 inches. Right there. Right there. And I'll draw a line across. Now, because it's going to be stone below this, but it's going to be concrete above it. Okay? So I'll just put that mark there. And then I can proceed to make the cross pieces. Well, I guess before I do that, I better show you this. In all the stone trestles I've seen, we have the bricks laying this way, but along the arch, we have bricks actually following the arch. Okay, let's not use a pencil. Let's use this. We don't need any more marks. So I'll just follow this arch around one time. Like that. And then we'll just make our stones. But let me turn this around. I'm not sure whether you can see, but you need to carry it all the way around like that. See? You need to carry that scribe all the way around. So mark these and carry it all the way around. Now, if you like, you can try and match these stones to the underside here. In other words, try to match them to these. You can do that if you want. But I say the underside of this bridge is barely going to be seen. And I think it's a waste of time. But on your layout, you can do what you want to do. But this is the way I'm going to do it. And I'm going to run this all the way around like this. All the way around. Then I'm going to use this clear across the whole thing to keep it make sure the lines match each other on either side. Here, let's draw this on this side. Nope, I've already started here. Okay. And again, I'm just eyeballing this. If you want to make precise measurements, you're certainly free to do that. But at end scale, everything is so small, it's really hard to go wrong. So we'll make these all the way down. And we'll do our stones. I put a half stone there, and a whole stone, and a half stone. And continue these. Like this. Okay? And we'll do the same thing all the way down here. Take these all the way around. We'll also do the same thing on this side. We'll bend this up, put it in here, scribe it, and do it exactly the same way. Okay? And so when I have these cut and scribed with the stone, leaving the top 3/8 plus another 1/4 inch, so that's 5/8 inch, leaving 5/8 at the top without stone on it. When I have that finished, we'll come back and we will attach them to the the base here. All right, before I started to color it, I thought I'd show you how it looks. You see, we have the concrete part up on top here, and notice, see if I can get this where the camera can see it, how the the stones on the arch go all the way around. There, can you see it? Go all the way around, because that's going to be colored too, and that'll be underneath the part we've already glued to our bridge. So now I'm going to color this exactly the same way I colored the other, with gray chalk, followed by yellow chalk, followed by red chalk, followed by black chalk. Again, it's going to be sooty up through here. But we don't need any chalk up here, because that's going to be paint. Okay, I have my layout now, and I placed my bridge underneath, and I have glued the inside part to it. You can see the heads of the pins that are holding it in. When you pierce your outside, make sure you do it in the mortar area of the stones, because it will show less when you pull it out. And on this side, I have the piece I've been working with. You can see it's all colored now, and you can see I've cut the notch out of the ends so that it will fit under. So now we're going to glue it together. Whenever you're gluing foam, be sure to use a water-based glue. White glue is just fine. The thing I dislike about white glue for this project is that it dries brittle, and I don't want it brittle. I want something more flexible. What I use is Crafter's Pick, the ultimate glue. It is a water base. It comes out very thick, similar to Eileen's tacky glue. I find this easier to use than Eileen's, because I don't want to use a brush. I want to use the dauber. And so first I'm going to test this to make sure I have the notches cut right. And it looks like we have a good match, and it feels good under here. Oh, by the way, make sure that you do color under here. And I also colored a little bit along this edge, so to make sure I had no white showing. So we'll place this down and keep the glue near the edges. And a little in the middle. Now this glue, just like white glue, goes on white and dries clear, but it also dries flexible, and it's I think much easier to work with after the fact. So I use it for almost everything except ballasting. But again, it will not hurt your foam. Okay. So you can see we have the raised section back here and here, and this area is going to be concrete, and I'll show you how we do that after the glue dries. But for right now, we'll start by pinning it, and again, make sure that you put your pins in one of the mortar joints in the stones. That way, when you remove it, you won't really be able to notice the hole. See how you check under here to make sure it's together, but remember, nobody's going to see under there, except any people you might have on your train. But get the pins in around the edges, because that needs to hold tight. and a few in the upper areas. It won't take much. This glue is very sticky, and it will hold everything up nicely. So when this dries, I'll show you how I lay the concrete in here, and then we will paint the concrete area and weather it a little bit, and we'll have our bridge. So that's the next step. Our sides are glued on nice and tight. So I'm going to use this little pair of dikes here and pull out my pins. Now the glue gets on the pins, and you may have some problems with some, taking out more of your foam, colored foam than you want. But in most instances, all you have to do is run your finger over it like this, and you'll actually push chalk that's on it into the hole, okay? But in a worst case scenario, where you pull out a big huge plug of foam with chalk on it, don't worry about filling in the hole. Just get some more chalk and put on it, and that'll just be a place where the rock crumbled. And if you like, I know I had that on one layout, and Woodland Scenics makes a set of mason people, and so I just set them up to repair the stone. It was as simple as that. So I'm going to finish removing the pins from both sides, and then we'll get to the concrete in the center. Before we begin to pour the concrete, I'm going to block off the ends here, just a piece of the foam board that we used to form it. This notch cut out, and we'll put that down and use a couple of pins to hold it in. Okay. Here's the other. All right. Now, what I'm going to use for the concrete is Dep Joint Compound. It's changed a little bit since the last jug I brought. It's pink. So I'm not worried about it because I'm going to paint the concrete anyway. So it can be any color, but this is a new one on me. Now the reason I use Dep is because it's really thick, and you don't want to use that stuff in the 5-gallon bucket that you get in the drywall section. It's been thinned and it's ready to apply on the wall. We just want something really, really thick. So you can see how thick it is. Excuse me, down here. You can see how thick it is. So that's what we want. And we're going to apply it straight in on our tracks, like this. Now, of course, we're not going to want it high in between the tracks and the original, but that will sand out later, okay? We don't have to worry about it right now. It's going to be fine to have it just like this. And when we do our carving on it and sanding on it later, this joint compound sets up really hard as compared to spackle and patching paint and all of that stuff. Those things may be good for what they're intended, but you're better off having something really hard for your concrete so that when you have to shape it and cut into it, for instance, right in through here against the track, we're going to have to cut it so that cut it down so that the wheels, the flanges of the wheels can go in there. So that's going to have to be cut down, and we're also going to have to lower in between the tracks so that the parts of the coupler that hang low don't get in there and run into problems. Okay, let's take this back the other way. Now this paint is really playing tricks with my mind here. It's just doesn't look like what I've been doing for years and years. But again, as I said, I'm not worried about it. I'm going to paint it anyway. Okay. So, we have that laid in. Have it done out nice and smooth. If there are a few lumps in it, don't worry, we're going to sand it. And of course the stuff's made to be sanded. But it'll also be nice and hard so we can come back with a knife and just cut into it right through here and right through here. And then I'll show you how I sand down the inner part to make sure that it's low enough for the cars to pass. So that will be our next step. When this is dry, I usually like to let 24 hours. I think it says 8 hours on the bucket here. But you go ahead and since they changed everything else, they may have changed that too. But I always wait a good 24 hours to make sure that it's good and hard, because remember, this stuff was intended to be put on the wall thin, and we're putting it on thick, okay? 1/4 of an inch thick. So it's going to need more time for drying. I had an idea while I was beginning to get out materials to work on the other bridge I have on this layout. This is my new palette knife that I use sometimes, and I had an old one, the end was damaged on, so I decided to cut it off square, and I cut a notch on either side, and I made that to fit in between the rails. So let's see if I can save myself some problems and see if I can take out and it looks like it's working. I'm so proud of myself. I just saved myself a lot of work. Okay, this is going to make a big difference. Now I do want the joint compound to cover. Let me take this off, camera off, pedestal here. But I do want it to cover the rails, the ties. I want it to cover there. It's okay if it's up as high out here because the flange is on the inside, wheel is on the inside. Although I probably will take it down just a little bit, like that. You can see what I'm doing there. I'll take it down just a little bit, and that'll just make it easier to keep the rails clean, because this is still where your power comes in. I'm trying to look at the camera and the tool at the same time. So I will take care of that, and when this is dry, we'll take the ends down, and we can begin to paint, okay? Well, there's good news and bad news. The good news is that the pink joint compound dries white. The bad news is that it shrinks about 25%. Let me move in here, and we have this bumpy ridge inside there, so I'm going to have to put more of the joint compound in there to make up that with that. The same way you can see this other bridge I'm working on, I've already done it. But for now, we can work on the outside, and then we'll put some more joint compound in between the rails. All right, the main tool for this part, I have a knife with a straight blade on it. And also, I'm going to be using what's known as a drywall sponge. It's rough. It comes in a square about yay big. And it's rough all around, and it's good for getting in corners. And they use it for cleaning off the edge of the gypsum when they have broken a section out. And these are the tools that we're going to be using right now. Okay, the first thing I want to do is go up against the rail here, and I'm going to cut this away. Because the joint compound has shrunk a little bit down and through here. Rather than filling it in, I'm just going to go ahead and shave it off down to its own level. Well, I'm not sure why this is going so hard. It was real easy on the other bridge. So I'll do that across like that, just to get it away, and of course scrape anything off the top. Then we'll use our drywall sponge, and it will not only sand down the joint compound, it'll sand down your sponge, your foam core too. All right, so that's the next step. Clean this off across here, the way I've been doing, on both sides of the rail. There we go. Now we're getting it around. Okay. All right. And sand down. So I will finish this section and get back, and we'll do the between the rails again. It looks like I messed up the last part of the recording I was making using my new tool. I'll go ahead and fill between the tracks again. And then this time, instead of up like this, we'll leave it at a greater angle. That way we don't get in there so deep. And we'll see what we get when it dries this time. Because it's a lot thinner now than it was, this center part may dry very quickly. I don't know. As I'm just learning how to use this particular product. It's not what I'm used to. But like anything in model railroading, you can always tear it out and start over again if necessary. So while this is drying, I'm going to clean up around here just a little bit, and we can go ahead and start painting the major portion of the bridge. I like to use acrylic artist paints. They mix well. You can put them on. They come thick, but they're easily thinned with water if you need thin. For my color here, the color I like to use is a color called warm gray, but I don't have enough of it to do both my bridges, and since I want them to look the same, I'm going to have to mix my own color. So I've taken gray and I've mixed it with, what is this, milky white, and I put in a little red rust to warm it up a little bit, and I end up with this light gray color. There are other colors on the market. Woodland Scenics makes one that's called Concrete. It's especially for it. It's a little yellow for me, but then in the end, concrete looks different depending on where it is, how old it is. So your concrete can be whatever color you say it is. I also like to use a brush that is flat and square across. This is better for going up against edges. And one of the things that I've noticed about this joint compound, that even though I went over it with a wet towel to pick up all the dust, and the bucket actually says that it's a lightweight, low dust joint compound, I still am finding dust, and that's sometimes when you go back over a spot where you've missed a little bit, it's been ripping it up on me. So just another thing I don't like about this joint compound. I'm going to have to find another product. Don't worry about getting paint on your rails. This is acrylic paint, and it will scrape right off with your knife. Okay? And plus, the only place it really has to be off is the top of the rail, where the power is conducted. Okay. I'm going to finish painting this area, and then I'm going to move the camera over to my other bridge, which is ready to, the joint compound is dry enough that I can paint in there, and we'll paint on the inside of that. This is my other bridge. This one was straight. I showed you the curved one because it was more complicated. This one was a lot easier to do. I have cut this thin piece of drywaller's sponge to fit in between there, but as I look at it, it all looks really, really nice, and I don't want to mess with it. So we'll get right into my painting. And painting is just a matter of getting the paint from the paint can or container to the surface. And again, I'm not worrying about getting any paint, although I'm trying to keep the paint off the rails. I'm not worried about it, because I can cut it off later when the paint dries. Okay? And if I slop over like that, I can take care of that right now. So that's all it is. Now, I don't know about the cars that you use. If you're using a microtrain couplers or something like that that has a metal pin that comes down for magnetic uncoupling, that hangs kind of low. And of course we have our joint compound here just a little bit higher than the rails. Therefore, if you're doing a bridge like this, it may be necessary to cut those pins back a little bit so that they don't drag in here. If that's something you don't want to do, I have done it on cars, because I have one of the a bridge like this on a layout that also has magnetic uncoupling, and I just cut the pins and they still uncoupled very well, no problems. So I will be back when my bridge is finished drying, the paint finishes drying. We'll scrape a little paint from the rails if we need it, and then we'll weather the concrete. All right, the paint is dried and cured, and what I wanted to happen did happen. It pulled away slightly from the rails where it was. So as you can see here, the paint is not up high on the rails. It's a little up in some places. But I ran my locomotive over it, and it ran through like a champ. No stalls, no stutters, so I'm happy with it. So now we're going to apply color to weather it. For color, I'm again going to use weathering chalk, just like I did with the stonework. And I'm going to start with dirty yellow. And use my brush. We want to keep it light, so bang it off a little bit. We don't need to put too much color up here. And just run it in. Now you can see I have some spots on there where the paint is off. Don't worry about it. The raw joint compound will take the color too. So we'll just run that all over haphazardly, but I want to give it I want a little bit of yellow everywhere. It's okay to have some hard streaks in some places. That's quite all right, but they will be random because you don't know where it's going to be. And let me get some on the back side too. Oh, and you can run this color right into the stonework because the yellow's there too. And there we go. Okay, so we've got the yellow on to age a little bit. And then we need our dirt and our soot and all of that stuff, and that is black. I like to run it right over the track instead of down the middle of the track. Boy, I got more than I needed there, didn't I? But look at what I'm doing here. See? And I want some down the middle. Okay. All right. Now, I just wet my finger and run it over the track, and that will take care of any chalk that's on it. And we are all ready. I hope you found this tutorial useful. For those of you who have more time than money, this is a great way to build a 50-cent ridge. It fits exactly on your layout.